Welcome, y'all! Woo! That's right. This is the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast for Thursday, July 2nd, 2015. That's right, we're back on a Thursday. This is Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace. I'm here with Andrew Sherwin, Pregame Engineer. What's happening, buddy?
I tell you what, it's nice to be back on a weekday.
It is. I just got back. I just walked in from being in Washington, D.C., and I know you've been traveling this week too, huh?
Yep, I just flew in from Wisconsin last night through Milwaukee. So, yeah, I got home about 11 o'clock last night.
That's right. As promised, we went our separate ways from the Atlanta airport and joined right back for the PETM on Thursday, right where it should be, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, what you drinking there, Sherwin?
Well, tonight I've got one of my favorite Abita beers, and I've got a Bomber, which for those not familiar with the vernacular, Bomber is a 22-ounce.
The double deuce?
Referencing the B-22 Bomber. The Andy Gator, which is a Hell's Double Bock. It's quite delicious.
Double deuce, also from Roadhouse fame, obviously. That came well after the Bomber, but hey, that's just as fun for folks like us.
Right, the double douche.
The double douche. And Wade Garrett's getting old, buddy.
Oh, he's still the best.
That's right. So starting off with our favorite segment is mistakes we made last week. And I got to admit, Sherwin, I listened to the whole thing, and I don't think we got too technical or anything, and I couldn't pick anything out. But there's no doubt that, I'm an idiot, so I had to make a mistake. And to the listeners out there, I apologize for the mistakes, and you're probably screaming at me right now like, you idiot, this is what you did. Yeah, I understand. I didn't do it, or I didn't mean to do it. So I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't make any mistakes. I'm just going to apologize for the ones that I didn't hear myself make.
Well, as long as we're not getting paid for journalism, we're always going to make mistakes because doing the amount of research to support our commentary isn't always a good use of our time.
That's true, and I don't research opinion very much either. So, so be it. How about you?
Well, I don't. Yeah, like I said, I didn't even have a chance to listen to it. I listened to 5 minutes of it before we got on today just to make sure I remembered one of the hot topics that we covered last week. I think it's going to continue to be a topic for a while, unfortunately. Likewise, I apologize to the listeners for if I made some clerical error in my comments. I apologize if I missed 06 when it should have been 08. Okay, cool.
That's right.
Nail me to the wall if you have to, but you know, we try to keep this thing pretty light right now, and as knowledgeable as we are and as good of memories as we have, we're occasionally going to make those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah. And what is it that Larry the Cable Guy says? Lord, I apologize. Please be with the starving pygmies down there in New Guinea.
That's right.
So I just got, like I said, I just got back from Washington, D.C., and I posted this on Facebook. Maybe I'll put it up on Twitter or something. I had a MARTA math, and for those of you who don't know, MARTA is the subway system in Atlanta. We have the northbound line, and we have the east and westbound line, and that's it. So it's nothing like a real city like New York or London or something that has an awesome system there. But it's notoriously off schedule, and I took this picture, and I thought it was hilarious. Try to do this math, two trains running each other at the same time, which one's going to get there first, and how big's a crash sort of deal. This one was sitting in the airport. Now, airport is the end of the line for Atlanta. So that's a bottommost, a southmost stop is the Atlanta airport. And they have a board up there to tell you when the trains are coming and leaving. Now, there's no trains in the station, zero, right? I'm just standing there waiting on a train to come. And as soon as it gets there, it's going to turn around and go the other way because that's the end of the line. There's no trains in the station. The board says 7 minutes to the next arrival and 2 minutes for the next departure. So go figure that one out. Guess I have to go in the negative there. I don't know how that works.
Ghost train.
Ghost train. Yep, ghost train. If I could have got on the ghost train, I'd have been 5 minutes earlier than I was. So what can I say? Otherwise, we're sitting here doing the podcast 5 minutes later than I would have. But it's good to be back in the saddle.
Yeah, well, I want to go ahead and inform the listeners if they heard some strange popping or banging. coming over the audio, it's because my neighbors have discovered that Georgia now allows mortars to be sold legally and
Murica.
discharged legally, and that's
Murica.
happening right outside of my window. So
Murica.
Awesome. Yeah. God bless America.
That's right. So same thing happened. It's funny you say that, because as I was loading up the podcast, I heard some racket outside, and I thought, what in the world's going on out there? And then it hit me. Yesterday is when the law, all the laws that are signed back in January or whatever, that for some reason they all come to effect on July 1st. And that was yesterday. And so everybody can buy mortars and everything in Georgia now. And sure enough, everybody around me is shooting them off. So go USA.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, speaking of USA, we got a little bit of Women's World Cup to talk about, man. So I know this isn't the NASCAR tie-in, but we've been talking about it the whole time. I've been hooked. I've watched every second of every match so far. I even watched the other semifinal match between England and Japan in a wild match on that one. But let's talk about the U.S. women first.
Well, first of all, I'm thoroughly jealous because for 2 weeks in a row, I have been unable to watch due to business travel or business function.
Yeah.
Thanks to you for keeping me updated via text.
Via all capital letter text, while a little bit sideways on the local fare.
Absolutely. I was the hit of the business dinner the other night when I was able to provide details about what was going on with the game. Very pleased to announce when Kelly O'Hara scored that she's from my hometown. I don't know why I take additional pride in that, other than that's the way Southerners do.
She go to your high school?
She did not. She went to Stars Mill.
Okay.
But she lists her hometown as Fayetteville, and that's the same hometown I list. So that's good enough for me.
That's awesome. And we beat the Germans 2-0 in a pretty dramatic game, and not only one that was dramatic for us. It was, or I should say, it was one where we just stopped the number one team in the nation from doing what they do. There was at one point, I think at the end of the first half, they showed this stat. They said average shots for Germany per game in the World Cup so far is 26.3 or something like that. Total tonight, 3. So the defense shut them down. It was beautiful to watch. And what are we looking forward to next, Sherwin?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be me, and this isn't me coming at you, but you did say nation, and I want to say world.
Ooh, that was going to be – I was setting myself up for next week's mistake.
Yeah, man. I'm going to go ahead and rectify that right now.
Thank you very much.
Germany is number one in the world.
Did I say they were number one in the nation?
You did.
That is awesome.
Well, that'll happen. We're so used to college football and everything else.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, what's up next is Japan. They squeaked by England on one of those plays that will haunt a defense person for the rest of their lives, more than likely. Laura Bassett created a deflection that scored a goal on her own team, which is a bummer. But Japan, nonetheless, we will play on Sunday night. Coverage begins at 7 o'clock on Big Fox, the broadcast channel. You don't need cable to watch this one, so tune in.
That's right. And we have something else at 7 o'clock on Sunday, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But if you got 2 TVs, throw them on. If you're going to be at the bar, tell them to put one on each, and you're going to have a good time, no doubt. So, Sherwin, last week, we had our serious conversation. We talked about the whole flag thing, and we talked about our opinions of it and what we thought. Since then, I think there's been a lot of community discussion about it, and I don't want to revisit necessarily what we said, but I thought it was interesting what has come out of the community here. So first off, NASCAR has asked fans to stop flying the flag during I guess the tailgating portion of the races and of course in the stands itself.
In the infield.
Yeah, and in the infield. That's a good point. So from what I've seen in the media, I would say every and I mean 100%, every respectable person in the NASCAR community that's either journalist or commentator or whatever you want to call it, down to podcasters like us, and people I respect in the community, are united in saying that this is something that just needs to go away. And I'm interested in the contrast between that and the replies that they're getting on Twitter, the comments they're getting on Facebook and everything. If you scroll through the Facebook comments, I mean, it's almost disappointing. It is disappointing. I shouldn't say almost. It is disappointing just to see I don't know, the acidity of the comments that are coming through. And then, of course, NASCAR's asking everybody to stop flying that flag. And I think that's a double-edged sword there. Number one, I think that's respectable for NASCAR to say that. But number two, I'm wondering if they're based on the type of folks who are there, that might backfire a bit. And we've already said our opinions on it. So let our opinion again be known that we fully support NASCAR's opinion there, and are on board as well with getting rid of the whole thing. But I'm wondering if this is something that maybe NASCAR's taken a little too far. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a huge conundrum for NASCAR. I suspect they probably could have left this thing alone and stuck with their previous history of saying, for the last better than a decade, that we're never going to use that symbol. And let's be perfectly clear about what symbol we're talking about. We are talking about the Confederate battle flag, the square flag with a blue X and a backfilled red background. That is the flag that drives the most conversation, and that talks about hatred, that talks about heritage. That's the flag that people most symbolize with the issues that went on in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. And that's when those flags really crop back up. Those flags were prevalent during the actual Civil War, but they disappeared largely for almost 100 years. Mm-hmm. And they resurfaced when this country really started to try to get its act together and make sure that everybody that gets to live in this country, it lives under the same set of rules and the same set of opportunities. So, it's a scary situation to try to address with people that don't seem to understand. And I think it's even worse for people, for the folks that are born after even we are. Like, we have the ability to look back at history based on our parents and understand what was happening, because they were born during that time period, or they were maybe even teenagers during that time period. And they understand the complications that went along with trying to make sure that people were treated the same way, regardless of, skin color, race, affinity with a particular religion, and that sort of thing. And the thing that I've been harping on this week, and I've been using Twitter as a conduit for that, is that there are so many symbols that represent what it is to be Southern in terms of flags that were never used in a way that are offensive to the people that find them offensive. And it doesn't matter who finds it offensive. It could be anyone. You don't get to single out some one group here or there and say, well, I don't think that ought to be offensive. Well, you don't get to judge that, because the offender doesn't get to decide who the offendee is.
Yeah. And why do we need a flag in the first place? Why does the South need a flag in the first place? I think I said it last time. I don't need a symbol for that. Just come down here. Come see us. You're going to get that Southern hospitality. You're going to get everything the South is known for, that laid-back style, that slow Southern style, as they say. And why do you need a flag for that necessarily? I don't need a symbol for it. I've got it.
Well, I've got a flag, and it's going to be the one that hangs in my living room. Normally, it's going to hang outside my house on my garage door starting tomorrow. That's the American flag. That's Stars and Stripes,
that's right,
baby.
That's right. So I think in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all we got to say about that. Maybe not. Maybe until next week when the next thing happens. Like I said, I did say that I wonder if NASCAR is going to have this backfire on them. I hope they don't. I hope the fans are able to do some critical thinking, which is not a stereotype that they are typically able to do. But hey, we're NASCAR fans here, and we're able to do that. So, hopefully that does ring true for some people and doesn't backfire as much as I think it might. I want to see it gone, but I'm curious if that's the right way to go about it.
As much as I don't want to – no, you're totally right, and this is the right conversation we should have. I appreciate it. I'm going to segue in the most blanket way possible.
Okay.
And I'm going to be a homer for a second. The Braves just walked off with a home run.
Oh, man.
A lot of fun. They beat Scherzer, the best pitcher in baseball, so that's fun.
Awesome. Well done. Who hit the homer?
Cameron Maben.
All right.
Yeah. So apologies for that interruption, but I was too excited to hold it in.
Well, thanks. So no, that lets us get off that topic that I just want to shake anyway because I'm done with it. Let's go to Daytona, man. We've got the Coke 0400 coming up, and NBC is taking over as usual around this time frame. So what's the story there?
Well. So I get to sort of atone for the mistake I made maybe 5 podcasts ago, and I said I thought it was NBC's turn to start. NBC will now take over primary broadcast responsibilities for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. We're going to have what used to be the Firecracker 400. We're going to run it on a Sunday night for the first time ever scheduled. And it's going to be run on cable, which is not altogether new. This race used to be run on TNT on cable on a Saturday night, but we're going to run it on Sunday night. And the only problem I have with that is, unfortunately, it does conflict with the U.S. ladies soccer game in the World Cup finals. But you know what? It's pretty easy to find 2 TVs to watch these days, so we can probably sort that out. I believe the race will last longer than the World Cup game, and I believe the World Cup game is actually going to kick a little bit earlier. So I think we can make that work as a sports fan of both NASCAR and women's soccer.
Yeah, it's a shame, like you said, that these things conflict like that. I think it's hard to do that sort of scheduling NASCAR ahead of time to say, oh, well, that's the Women's World Cup final would start at that same time, potentially – the U.S. could be in that if they win, 6 games or whatever. So, it's hard to blame NASCAR for that. They're excited about having this race on Sunday night as opposed to the previous years. And I think the drivers are excited too from what I've seen on Twitter. So that's cool. But, if you, like you said, if you've got access to those 2 TVs, one of them has to be on Women's World Cup, especially in the beginning. Play with the mute button a little bit, get that Women's World Cup on first. And start rooting them on and go crazy when they score and when they bring home the cup.
Well, I don't think NBC would have ever predicted, first off, that Fox would win the broadcast bid for Women's World Cup, number one. Number two, that the momentum from last year's World Cup would have generated as much excitement about the women's game. And number three, that somehow the U.S. women would be pitted against their race. However, the one thing that made this different, and one of the reasons why they decided to go to Sunday primetime, hoping to find a spot where they didn't have to compete with very many games. I don't know if if Major League Baseball is already off for the All-Star game yet. I think they may have another week. But I assume they thought they weren't going to compete with anybody, and for broadcast eyeballs. But the other thing is that while they're doing this reconstruction of Daytona, the rebuilding of Daytona, as they're saying, I believe that the Daytona International Speedway only holds about 50,000 people for this race for ticketed people.
Yep. Yeah, I'm really excited to see what this new Daytona is going to look like, and I think we'll have some previews here, at least in this race. But maybe we got to make our trip down there again, huh?
Well, I want to go.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, as much as you let me know when we're going to segue into when we talk about plate racing, but I want to be. I want to go to a Daytona.
I think you just did.
I may have. But the PETM podcast may have to go ahead and give some opinions on plate racing. I think Rusty's got a little bit more structure about how he wants to handle it, so I'm going to pass it back to you to intro it. But I know we both have very similar opinions about the style racing that we see at Daytona.
Yeah, so and listen up, everybody. So when we originally talked about doing this podcast back in December, so it's been 7-8 months at this point that we originally started talking about this. One of the things that we said that we were going to talk about is plate racing, and we'll talk about it again, I'm sure, as soon as we get a few more listeners too, and as many ears that can hear what we have to say about it. We want to hear that, or we want to say that. And here's what we have is the same sort of pack racing that we've had for a long time. That's a throwback to the olden days, this type of pack racing. And it's pretty much a don't crash out type of thing. There's always the big one with 10 or 12, 15, whatever cars that wreck, and that's what ends up on Sports Center, and that's what the not even casual fan, that's what the Sports Center fan tunes in to see. Oh, how big was the wreck? And I think those voices are a bit too loud right now, and they're not catering to the real NASCAR fans who want to see better racing. And now what would be better racing on these plate tracks? Let me tell you what we had there for a couple of years, and everybody who's been watching for a while knows. And it's something that I think was really unique. It's really neat. It's something we had not seen before, and it was something that every lap was dramatic. And that's the tandem racing that we had. So 2x2 racing, these cars going really fast, hooking up with each other, and I think the coolest thing to me was the amount of communication between the drivers, between the crew chiefs, between the spotters up on the deck to find friends and try to reconcile with enemies on every single restart. I thought that was really cool to have. Of course, one of those races we had Trevor Bayne win, the Daytona 500, which I think maybe put a lot of people off to that, just because that's about his only success so far in the Sprint Cup Series. So I really liked that. I really liked seeing how the drivers could talk to each other. They had it set up so that, the first year they did it, they were just kind of all spotters were talking to each other. Then eventually we got to the point where the drivers had all those switches where they could talk to each other on the track, and they would pick out their favorite guys or whoever they thought would be near them. I thought that was some of the coolest, neatest racing we've seen. And what happened was that NASCAR pulled the audience or whoever it was and said, the fans don't like this. The fans want to see this pack racing. And the first pack race we had after that, I'm telling you, it was a snooze fest. It must have been Daytona because that's the first race of the year, obviously. But it was a Talladega race after that I think is 187 laps, and it was 185 laps of just snooze fest. And I remember Tony Stewart saying that coming out of that race, and he goes, "Well, that was boring." And he says, "If you enjoyed that, what are you doing here? That was just we ran around for 185 laps and we crashed." And 187, it's random. So I'm saying if it's going to be random anyway, it might as well be random in something that I think is unique, cool, fun to watch, and exciting and dramatic, where every lap is something different. Every lap counts. So there's my rant, man. You're up.
What I would say is I would call in one piece of history, one piece of data. That race that Jimmy Johnson won, and I think he was getting pushed by Dale Earnhardt Jr.
I just got goosebumps. Do you see him? We have video going.
Yeah,
but
tandem style drafting, where they came 5 wide, 2 deep to the line at Talladega, and four cars crossed the line within 0.005 of a second of each other.
Yeah.
How is that not exciting? How is that not better than what you just described about Tony Stewart's comments about that race back in, I think I might have even been at that race. I
Mhm.
mean, because I think that was a fall race at Talladega that I was actually at, and they weren't doing the tandem then. This 2 and 3 deep riding around for 450 miles at a 500-mile race or 370 miles at a 400 race. How is that? I don't understand how that's entertaining for the fan. I know how it's nerve-wracking as hell for the driver.
Yeah.
Because we can't feel what's going on with those cars. You can see it, and they come into the corner, and the car moves, a foot and a half, 2 feet, and they come out of the corner, car moves foot and a half, 2 feet, and they're not even changing the wheel position. It's because the wind and all the aero stuff that's going on is crazy. Like it is very confounding to me that the majority of fans that NASCAR seeks opinion from thinks that tandem racing wasn't fun.
So I did a boycott actually with Talladega. I actually boycotted it. It was the only race that by choice I did not watch so far this year. And after it was over and after I saw who won and I read a little bit of the recap, Sherwin, I didn't miss it. Isn't that bad? Does that make me a bad person?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I have threatened on many occasions to not watch based on rule packages. And there was definitely a race this year that I put on the small TV. And you know me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really do that.
Yeah.
Like racing is my number one thing, unless Georgia Tech's playing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even willing to put the Falcons on a little TV for a race. But if I put the race on the little TV, that lets you know where I'm at with it.
Yeah. It was, like I said, it was, I read it to the end and I went, huh, okay. And I can't remember who won because I'm horrible at that stuff. But whoever won, I was like, oh, okay, good for them. And then I read the recap and it's like, yeah, there were a couple wrecks and somebody won the race. I was like, oh yeah, that, no kidding.
What makes it even better was that this year's Talladega
Yeah,
race?
yeah, that was this year.
Oh, you know what makes it even better?
What's that?
It was Dale Jr. that won the race.
And
that's what makes your argument even better.
Yeah. And I root for him nowadays. There was a time where I didn't root for him just because the whole Junior Nation thing, I was sort of more of a not anti-junior, but the didn't want to be a bandwagoneer or whatever. And so nowadays, him winning is good for the sport, and him opening up a bit more and being on Twitter and all that sort of stuff. I've become a fan, and being Hendrick along with Casey Kane, who we've talked about before, being our favorite driver here. So yeah, even when he won, it was like, oh, okay, cool, good for Junior, and that's about it. There was nothing about 500 miles of that was going to excite me, though. I guarantee if you watch the last 3 laps, you've watched the entire race.
Right, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't have a reason to tune in. So, again, guys, as far as I'm talking about, watch this Women's World Cup and then flip it over to the Coke 0400. I guarantee they're going to be 3 wide. They're going to be, 10 deep, 3 wide, and nothing will have changed since the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, Daytona being narrow, they're probably going to just be 2 wide for the last 20, but they'll be 3 wide for the last 3. And then somebody will screw up in the tri-oval, and then we'll have a 15-car wreck, and then we'll probably have a green-white checker, and it'll be a crapshoot from there.
Yeah, and that's something I think that's for another podcast. Well, we talked about green-white checkered a bit, but we didn't talk about it in terms of plate racing, and it's that just completely changes the game. It's like playing. It's like doing a whole different race when you have a green-white checkered at a plate race, where if you don't have the green-white checkered, they're all coming back to the line at speed. They can make different moves. The aero matters, all this stuff that matters. When it's green-white checkered, there's a lap to come up to speed, and then a lap of trying to figure out where you're at, and they're probably going to crash again.
Exactly right. And the biggest problem NASCAR faced is back in, I think it was 2007, when Jeff Gordon won his last race at Talladega. And I don't know if Junior crashed out or maybe he just got shuffled to the back, but they started hurling beer cans
from
the top deck. And NASCAR's like, all right, we got to do something different. We can't end these races under yellow. And that began the transition to where we got to now with 2 wide restarts, the lucky dog, and the green and white checker. And it has served quite a purpose on a lot of racetracks. But at plate racing tracks, we got to do something different because, like you said, if you go through a series, like, okay, so let's say the caution comes with 7 to go. It's easy to clean up. So you get back to green at 5. You have another wreck. All right. And you get back to green at 3. You have another wreck. All right. Well, we potentially have 3 more restarts coming after that.
Yeah.
So you could have a guy that was 3 laps down for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Just happens to be back on lead lap now. And then they drop it for the green white checker, and all of a sudden this guy's 5th.
Yeah,
and he was 3 laps down 11 laps ago. So like you have to be really careful with how you do that.
Yeah. Now I don't think we've seen that particular situation come to fruition, but yeah, your point is made there. And that just that's boring racing. You stand up, you're watching them come back around. They're coming up to speed on 1 lap, and then they all wreck. And okay, well now we got to fix that for the next few laps. So that's something to be fixed. So with that rant in place, it's time for our picks this week. And with the randomness, with the silliness that goes on, I'm not saying I'm picking a winner this week. Maybe I'm working on points. I'm not going for a win. I'm going for points this week, and maybe with our current situation, that's not a good idea. But I am going with Danica Patrick.
I like it. I like it a lot.
I think she's been around long enough, and she's shown that she's been around long enough in the plate races to hang up there, to not necessarily be involved in these wrecks. She can hang up in the top 10, top 5 even throughout the race. And I think she has potential to be a top 5. I don't know about winning quite yet, but like I said, I'm going for points this week. So who's your pick?
All right. Well, you inspired me to change direction, but I didn't go very far. I didn't even leave the reservation. I didn't leave the cul-de-sac. We talked about it before we got on air, and I made a pick. But now you've picked that person. I'm going to pick Tony Stewart.
Oh, that's a great pick. So we're both going Stewart-Haas then.
We're going Stewart-Haas. Tony has more wins than anybody that's active at Daytona. I think he's won the summer race 4 times.
And he showed some light last week, man. He's back in the saddle.
I think he's waking up. And I would love nothing better than to come back to this podcast next week and for you to say, ha, your driver pushed my driver to victory, because I think that would be pretty cool.
That would be really neat. Really. And going back, I hate to revisit it again, but isn't that the most exciting part of these races now is when they do go 2x2 at the very end? Isn't that what we're all standing up for and watching at the end?
Right. And then NASCAR's going, just let them do it. It looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
So why don't we do it all race long? Well, we had a few wrecks. We always have wrecks at these things. Nobody has ever gotten seriously hurt during tandem racing.
Yeah.
Why are the mouth breathers so upset by it?
Yeah. I think we talked about it before. There's an old guard that wants this throwback, that wants to see this the way it was. And we got to let the NASCAR brass know that, that's not their target demographic anymore. You got to get some new guys onto this thing. And I think with things like Twitter, Facebook, everything else, Snapchat, all that stuff we got going on nowadays, and all this social media and everything, the fact that these drivers can be able to talk to each other and also socialize and communicate, the more communication you have, I think that ties well into this generation of fans and sports fans, and that's the ones you want.
I did not weigh in heavily enough when you talked about how when the tandem draft developed into drivers had a radio selection panel and they could talk to like 15 or maybe even 20 different drivers. That was so cool. I'm glad that
we're goosebumps again.
Glad. Yeah, no kidding. I'm glad we're choosing not to cuss on this podcast, because I don't know which cuss word I would pick. An excitement cuss word, because I can't tell you how cool it was to be listening to Race View, listening to Casey's radio, and hear 3 or 4 different drivers talk to him directly.
Yeah,
That
and we're not talking
so
about
cool.
Yeah, we're not talking about the 3 guys he's talking to is Dale Jr. and Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon. No, he's talking to Tony. He's talking to Juan Pablo Montoya, who he had scuffles with. He's talking to everybody.
Yeah, they're
trying to find a friend.
So neat. And then NASCAR's like, "Oh no, we got to ban that. That radio stuff's got to stop." And it's like, what? That was the coolest thing y'all ever did.
Yeah,
From my perspective, being a fan for I guess about 12, 13 years now, getting real serious about it. That was the most amazing thing I had ever heard over the radio. Hey, I talked to Clint. Hey, Clint, you mind letting me pull in? Yeah, I'll slow up. You pull in. Off we go. What?
Yeah.
That was cool.
And the guys who were trying to find a friend, there'd be that one guy who's hung out there. Maybe it's Ricky Stenhouse Jr., so I don't think he was up there then. But the one guy who's searching for friends. And no. He calls Jeff Gordon. Hey, Jeff, you want to push me? No. I'm getting pushed behind me. I got Dale Jr. behind me. Oh, okay. Tony, you want to push me? And now I've got blah, blah, blah. So people searching for friends and then getting left, hung out to dry, and then somebody else coming up to him. Man, that's what made it every lap fun was trying to find out, okay, well, that guy just got shuffled to the back, so he's going to have to hang back with the lesser guy, with the C-list guys for a little while. And now he's getting pushed by one of them. Hey, the 2 C-list guys are up front now. What's going on? So, now I'm almost upset.
I know what you mean, because
talking about it.
That was so much fun. I think we had about 3 races there where they did that, and maybe only 2 where they had the significant amount of radio traffic that we're talking about, and that rebirthed plate racing for me.
Yeah,
because I'd all but given up on plate racing.
Yeah.
And that changed the game. And then when they said they were showing up at Daytona and you weren't allowed to have that cool radiator that Childress and company developed, they had a little hole over there on the right where they could run this really tiny radiator, but it had a port that was almost invisible over on the right side of the car. And they were still cooling, and they were just riding around 5, 6, 7 miles an hour faster than everybody. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And NASCAR was like, nope. Boom. We're not doing that. I'm like, why not? Well, that radiator is pretty expensive to develop. Yeah, but it was a top team that developed it.
Yeah, now everybody can do it.
Hendrick can go home tomorrow and figure that out? Or Roush? Or Gibbs? They're looking at that thing going, hey, man, them guys figured something out.
Yeah, that's innovation.
All it is plumbing. All it is aluminum plumbing.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah. All right. So we've conquered that. We will revisit that. I guarantee it. So I'm looking forward to it. The next time we talk about it, I've got Danica, you've got Tony. Like you said, hopefully they're pushing each other. So let's close it out, man. What are you doing for July 4th, America?
America, by God, but I don't have any plans. I'm empty-handed at this point, except for the fact that right behind my house, there's usually a really amazing park.
Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, that was awesome the time we went over there. And when Sherwin says right behind his house, I'm talking about like you walk through about 50 feet of woods, and then you emerge pretty much where they shoot the fireworks off from. And even the guys shooting them off are further away than you are sitting there in lawn chairs watching it. So maybe a little dangerous, but holy mackerel, that was really cool. So me and my wife last year went to this thing, and it's really neat. We don't have kids, and I'm not going to rant and rave about anything. We just don't have any kids. And so a good kidless activity, because it's hard to find that. Not that I don't hate kids or nothing, but it's hard to find activities on occasions like July 4th where you can go be adults somewhere. And the Georgia Aquarium, which is a world-renowned aquarium and really cool place and very modern and everything, has a beer fest, which is right up my alley. And right after the beer fest, you go up on their roof and you watch the fireworks that are shot off right in front of you. So really cool to do. And Sherwin, you ought to consider doing it.
Yeah. Yes, I am considering it. I was going to. I mean, we're still on air, but if they still have tickets, I am seriously considering it.
Yeah. Look tonight. So, And then I don't know about my Sunday plans. I guess around 7:00, I don't know. I'll probably just go to bed early or do some or watch the Women's World Cup and the Coke Zero 400. So,
always the comedian.
So yeah. So that's it, man. Send us off.
All right. Well, I want everybody to go ahead and watch the race, and don't forget, with all the distraction of the Cup race and Women's World Cup final, there is a nationwide race. Oh God, I did it again. There is
I let you roll with it. Once again, the Germans were bombing Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Everything was fine.
Yeah, everything was fine. The Xfinity race, and I believe that's the Firecracker 250, will roll off on Saturday evening, July 4th. Right about the time you're trying to watch fireworks, they're going to kick off a race. Of course, on television, they'll show fireworks, but that's not nearly the same as getting to see them in person. But don't hesitate to watch that race. It should be fun.
Or set the old diver.
Set the diver. That's always good. If you don't care too much about seeing things live, but you'd rather see fireworks, the DVR will work very well. The Braves have the Phillies this weekend, being Atlanta homer again. I guess we haven't done a whole lot of that on the podcast.
Oh, not much of the Atlanta side of things.
The Braves have got a couple plugs tonight.
Yeah, they have.
Bottom line is celebrate being an American and just understand what all that really means, and understand that your actions and your symbols impact other people, whether you know it or not.
Go America.
Go America.
Well, find us on Twitter, guys, at PETM Podcast. Once again, I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace. That's on Twitter at Tailgate Mayor. And Sherwin?
Yeah, once again, I've got that crazy weird spelling.
One day we'll tell Sherwin that capitalization doesn't matter.
We'll tell Sherwin that capitalization doesn't matter, and then he can probably search around for a better handle. But for now, it's at capital PRE, capital G, AME, capital ENGNR, Pregame Engineer.
All right, y'all. Happy 4th of July. We'll talk to you next week.